Hey, what's up? What's up? What's up? What's up? But gracious, good morning to you, good people. It's your girl KB. You know what I do, and you know why I do it. It is Friday morning. It is September 12th, and it's 3:36 in the a.m. Want to take a couple minutes to recognize 9/11, the people who lost their lives, the innocent victims, and I want to say, heroic, beyond superhuman rescue workers, many of whom gave their lives afterwards. And I say gave their lives because they died from, inhaling the toxic chemicals and, asbestos and all that other stuff in the air, from the time that the building was destroyed and other buildings were damaged. We didn't give enough time to their memorial because we were focused on other madness. And, it's too bad that the wolf tickets that are being sold, and I explained what wolf tickets were yesterday. And if you didn't see yesterday's videos, wolf tickets are empty threats from very, I want to say, shallow, fragile white men. We have the term toxic masculinity. Let's talk about fragile masculinity and all this yak bravado. I need to say to these brothers, you ain't got to talk about it. Never. Be about it. Stop writing checks your butt can't cash. Or if you're that big and bad as you purport, stand up to the person you're allegedly upset with. Call them out. That's what we did as kids. For those of you who knew how to knuck, you would go to the person and just call them out. You duke it out. Somebody won, somebody lost, and you go back to the business of the day. But see, we're making all this noise and all these threats, and then we're doing backdooring in these roundabout movements that impact people that have nothing to do with the original beef. And we're calling that brave. Here's a sickness. There's a shallowness. There's a disingenuous. There is a bunch of, I want to say, hot mess, dumpster fire people walking around with a little bit of juice. And as one of my friend's mothers says, you can't give a little person a big job. And I'm going to add to that because they gets to tripping. Do with that what you will. But I'm going to talk about Charlemagne the God. He's in a little bit of hot water. Now, I'm not a big fan of Charlemagne. I need to say that. And for those of you who don't know what I'm talking about, he's a radio personality on The Breakfast Club. Sometimes Charlemagne says a few things that are thought-provoking, controversial. Yeah, and now he's in a little bit of hot water with the people. Or as I like to say, the maggots. He was talking about the beloved Charlie Kirk. This is what he said. First, he condemned the assassination as horrific, rightfully so. You know, that empty talk, all this challenging rhetoric led to violence for the folks who are writing wolf tickets. But this is what Charlemagne said about the situation. Let me get my optical support. He says, everybody is just assuming this is political violence. And it quite possibly is. Matter of fact, I'm sure it is. But you know what else it is? Gun violence. But if you go back to the Charlie Kirk quote that I talked about yesterday, he talked about the Second Amendment being a God-given right. And basically he said a little attrition to have that God-given right is okay. So he said gun violence, you know, is going to result in some death, but that's okay because we continue to have the right to bear arms. Now I'm paraphrasing his quote, but that's the gist of it. That's it. He goes on to say, okay, these nutjobs who don't believe in freedom of speech clearly believe the right to bear arms, and because of the lax gun laws in America, they're able to get firearms and carry out these violent acts. Okay. What's false about that statement? Because sure has a whole bunch of people upset. See, she says, now, let the record show that when I heard what happened to Charlie Kirk yesterday, I immediately felt fear. Okay? I was afraid. I'm a black man in America. I think about getting shot every day. See, people don't understand that, but they'll immediately go to flag waving, patriotism, nationalism, and their rights. You know, they'll talk about black on black crime, but they don't understand at times they're the beneficiaries of a system that caters to violence. Charlemagne also said, but guess what? Every American should think about getting shot every day when you're out and about in a public place, simply because it's been 0 days since a mass shooting has happened in this country. It says, Kirk, a hardcore pro-gun demagogue who made a living stroking racial and gender division, was shot and killed as speaking even at Utah Valley University, seemingly with a high-powered long-range rifle. The shooter is still at large, thanks to the deeply incompetent MAGA hacks who now run the FBI. That's what he said. But then he goes on to say he fears for his life because he's a radio personality. I don't think too many people are concerned with you, Charlemagne, but they are now that you spoke out. You put yourself on the map for speaking out. Not that you should be afraid or anything, but, you know, I want to say on the list of, I want to say, folks, to be concerned about. Folks who have the capacity to make edicts, verdicts, decrees that impact a great deal of people. I want to say, Charlemagne, bruh, you're not even on a totem pole. I think folks are more concerned about your choice of guests or your choice of songs. Not saying that, you shouldn't worry. Again, I'm saying that. Not saying that you shouldn't worry. Being black in America, it supersedes everything. And I know there's going to be a bunch of folks that, hey, that disagree with me. Or who are going to say I'm being divisive. But I need people to know that I was born in the 60s. So I have that mindset and those sensibilities. I was old enough to see race riots in this country. I have family who are older than me, who were born and raised in Birmingham, so you know what they saw. I saw white flight in action because I grew up on the East Coast. When the steel mills and all of the auto plants shut down, people didn't give a damn about people of color. And that's when the ghettos developed. The corporations didn't care when they pulled out of those cities and jobs were removed. That's when the suburbs were created. And freeways were used to divide and create urban blight. The street that I grew up on, or I spent my formative years on, my parents owned that house. But the houses on either side were burnt out. So now that the house that I grew up in still stands on that lot, but there are 2 vacant lots on either side. Urban renewal is to tear down a house and not rebuild until the next wave of gentrification comes in. See, America refuses to understand that and accept that. They refuse to understand that gentrification is the takeover of historic neighborhoods for people of color. Based on white investments. And then now there's this new phenomenon where banks are buying up whole blocks of new housing development and then creating exorbitant prices in order to keep the areas gentrified. But we refuse to accept that and understand that. I'm challenging each and every person that's watching this video to go beyond the media. And I'm going to quote Gil Scott-Heron for the closing of these thoughts that I'm challenging you to consider. And the quote is, "The revolution will not be televised.